Ryan Coogler has revealed the complicated backstory on what his film Black Panther. Wakanda Forever was supposed to be before the tragic death of the original film star, Chadwick Boseman. Speaking to the New York Times, Coogler said the original intent was to make the film center about the relationship of fathers and sons. The struggle would have dealt with T'Challa's 5-year absence after the blip, the Thanos-induced mass extermination that saw half the universe's population reduced to dust, only to be brought back later. The sequel still would have had Prince Namor, the Submariner, as its villain. But T'Challa would have been tied to his love interest Nakia, who gave birth to a son, Toussaint, while he was away. Dealing with that new reality would have been the focus even as the Black Panther battled Namor. It was, "What are we going to do about the blip?" Coogler said to The Times. "That was the challenge. It was absolutely nothing like what we made. It was going to be a father-son story from the perspective of a father, because the first movie had been a father-son story from the perspective of the sons." Coogler continued. In the script, T'Challa was a dad who'd had this forced 5-year absence from his son's life, Coogler said. The first scene was an animated sequence. You hear Nakia talking to Toussaint. She says, "Tell me what you know about your father." You realize that he doesn't know his dad was the Black Panther. He's never met him, and Nakia is remarried to a Haitian dude. Then, we cut to reality, and it's the night that everybody comes back from the blip. You see T'Challa meet the kid for the first time. Then it cuts ahead 3 years, and he's essentially co-parenting, Coogler continued. We had some crazy scenes in there for Chad, man. Our code name for the movie was Summer Break, and the movie was about a summer that the kid spends with his dad. For his 8th birthday, they do a ritual where they go out into the bush and have to live off the land. But something happens, and T'Challa has to go save the world with his son on his hip. That was the movie. The rewritten version of Wakanda Forever became a meditation on grief and vengeance centered on T'Challa's sister, Shuri, who eventually becomes the new Black Panther. Coogler added that Val was much more active in the original plan. It was basically a 3-way conflict between Wakanda, the US, and Talokan, but it was all mostly from the child's perspective.
Airlines cancel 5,700 U.S. flights amid fierce winter storms. That followed nearly 2,700 canceled flights on Thursday, while just over 1,000 flights have already been canceled for Saturday, according to flight tracking website FlightAware. Passenger railroad Amtrak has canceled dozens of trains through Christmas, disrupting holiday travel for thousands. Highways in the Midwest faced lengthy delays because of snowy weather or crashes, and authorities in parts of Indiana, Michigan, New York and Ohio urged motorists to avoid non-essential travel. The Federal Aviation Administration imposed ground stops or delays for de-icing at a number of U.S. airports because of winter weather. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg told CNN the U.S. aviation system is operating under enormous strain, with 2 different storms and high winds affecting airports around the country. About 10% of U.S. flights were canceled on Thursday, Buttigieg said. Southwest canceled 1,238 flights on Friday, 29% of all its scheduled flights, while Alaska Airlines canceled 507, or 64% of its flights. Seattle-Tacoma International Airport had 357 flights, or 63% of departures, canceled Friday. The FAA lifted a ground stop there due to snow and ice, but late Friday delays were still averaging nearly 3 hours. Nearly half of departing flights at Detroit Metro were canceled, along with 70% at Portland, 38% at New York's LaGuardia, 29% at Chicago O'Hare and 27% at Boston. Chicago was facing dangerously cold temperatures with wind chills hitting minus 24 degrees Fahrenheit.
Shanghai asks residents to stay in on Christmas as China COVID surges. A branch of the Shanghai Municipal Health Commission on Saturday urged young people in particular to avoid crowded gatherings, due to the ease of spreading the coronavirus and low temperatures. Christmas is not traditionally celebrated in China, but it is common for young couples and some families to spend the holiday together. The Omicron variant is surging weeks after the authorities abruptly ended their zero-COVID policy, lifting strict testing requirements and travel restrictions as China becomes the last major country to move toward living with the virus. While many have welcomed the easing, families and the health system were unprepared for the resulting surge of infections. Hospitals are scrambling for beds and blood, pharmacies for drugs, and authorities are racing to build clinics. Shanghai typically hosts a large Christmas-themed market and a luxury shopping area along Nanjing West Road, and restaurants and retailers offer promotions to drum up business. But the spread of Omicron is dampening celebrations. Many Shanghai restaurants have cancelled Christmas parties normally held for regulars, while hotels have capped reservations due to staff shortages, said Jacqueline Makata, who works in the hospitality industry. There's only a certain amount of customers we can accept given our manpower, with a majority of team members who are unwell at the moment, she said. People lamented on social media that they will be staying inside as most of their friends have tested positive for COVID. I originally planned to go to Shanghai for Christmas, but now I can only lie in bed, a person wrote on Weibo, China's Twitter-like social network. Infections in China are likely more than 1 million a day, with deaths at more than 5,000 a day, in stark contrast to official data, British-based health data firm Airfinity said this week. China's National Health Authority on Saturday reported 4,128 daily symptomatic COVID-19 infections, and no deaths for a fourth consecutive day. Bloomberg News reported on Friday that nearly 37 million people may have been infected with COVID on a single day this past week, citing estimates from the government's top health authority. The emergency hotline in Taiyuan in the northern province of Shaanxi was receiving over 4,000 calls a day, a local media outlet said on Saturday. Taiyuan authorities urged residents to call the number only for medical emergencies, saying guidance about COVID does not fall within the scope of the hotline. A health official in Qingdao said the port city was seeing roughly 500,000 daily infections, media reported on Friday. In Wuhan, the central city where COVID emerged 3 years ago, media reported on Friday that the local blood repository had just 4,000 units, enough to last 2 days. The repository called on people to roll up their sleeves and donate blood. UN envoy calls for pressure on Taliban over women university ban. The United Nations Special Envoy for Global Education has called on Islamic countries to condemn a move by the Taliban banning female students from universities, the latest in a series of restrictions imposed on women in Afghanistan. This is one of the saddest days for those who are concerned with women and girls' rights, Gordon Brown said about the decision this week by the Taliban-led Ministry of Higher Education. In an interview with Al Jazeera broadcast on Friday, Brown said the Afghan economy would be harmed in the long run if women are not allowed to train as doctors, teachers, researchers, scientists, and for other professions. In the short run, the decision could lead women who have gotten used to being independent thinkers, would either try to leave the country or submit to these rules, he said. Brown, who previously served as UK Prime Minister, noted that while the West had limited leverage over the Taliban-led government following 2 decades of conflict, Islamic countries could play a vital role in swaying Taliban policies towards greater inclusivity. The way we can deal with this is for all our leaders in Muslim countries to protest and to say Islam does not require this, he said. In an editorial published in the British newspaper The Guardian, Brown noted that every country in the Muslim world except Taliban-run Afghanistan is publicly committed to the UN's Sustainable Development Goal that every child be ensured access to inclusive and equitable quality education by 2030. Qatar's Ministry of Foreign Affairs said in a statement on Tuesday that the actions would have a substantial effect on Afghanistan's economy, growth and human rights. Doha called on the interim government of Afghanistan to revisit its decision and apply Islamic principles on women's rights. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu said on Thursday that the ban was neither Islamic nor humane. Speaking at a joint news conference with his Yemeni counterpart, Cavusoglu urged the Taliban to reverse the decision. What harm is there in women's education? What harm does it do to Afghanistan? Cavusoglu said, is there an Islamic explanation? On the contrary, our religion, Islam, is not against education. On the contrary, it encourages education and science. The Saudi Ministry of Foreign Affairs expressed astonishment and regret at Afghan women being denied a university education. In a statement late on Wednesday, the ministry said the decision was astonishing in all Islamic countries. Since returning to power after U.S. troops withdrew in 2021, the Taliban has backtracked on its promise to guarantee the rights of girls to be educated and other freedoms. In March, it banned girls from secondary education, later extending the limitations to primary education and finally to higher education. The group argues its rules are in keeping with its interpretation of Islam. Female Afghan students protested against the ban on Friday in Kabul as Taliban personnel prevented their access to classrooms. The protests were quickly shut down by security officials.